In this tutorial, we're going to set up an animation for our thumbnail, such as when you hold your thumb on the thumbnail, you get a deacceleration into the full screen image. Welcome to Mobile Application Tutorials. My name's Nigel. Okay, so we're going to add an animation when we're transferring from the thumbnail to the full screen image. And there's going to be quite a bit of code for this one, so let's get started straight away. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to go into my layout XML file here and just do some changes here. Okay, previous couple of tutorials I played around with the padding. I need to remove the padding. I need to set define sizes for this image view so I can do some calculations with it. So let's delete those paddings. Okay, now I'm just going to set actual width and height because I need these calculations for the image view. So I'm going to set the width as 200 pixels and the height as 150, something like that, just so it shows up clearly as a thumbnail on the application. Now let's go back up to the relative layout here. I want to add an ID because I'm going to add the ID so I can get the actual dimensions of the entire layout of the application. So let's just simply add an ID here. And I'll just call this container. Okay, I need to do one more thing here. I need to put it inside the pinched zoom image view. I want to make that invisible. So when we first start the application, there is no full-size image, just the thumbnail. So we can make that invisible in the XML file here. And I'll just set that to invisible. Okay, that's all the changes I need to make to the XML file. Now let's go into the source file. Okay, first thing I need to do here is I'm going to create a number of variables here. First variable is going to be for the URI. It's what we used before, but I need to access that URI in other methods. So I'm just going to make the URI accessible to everything in the activity. So we'll set it up here. So URI, and I'll just call it member image URI. Now I need to add a couple more members here. One's going to represent our animation instance as such because we're going to want to close it if we're doing new animations. So it's an animator, and I'll just call it current animator, if I can spell it correctly. And I'm going to add one more member, and that's just to represent the time it takes to start the animation and complete the animation. And I'll just call it member, let's say long animation duration. Okay, those are my three members there. Now let's just adjust the code to support our member image URI. So let's see where that gets called. Okay, it's set up in this line here. So I can just delete this line here. Now fix the red warnings to now access it from the member we created. And it gets called down in one place, this place here as well. Let's check for any red horizontal bars. No, it looks okay. Okay, that's fine. Now if we go back up here, we can just leave the current animator as is for this moment in time. Now's a good time to set the time for the animation duration, and we can do that in the onCreate method. On duration. And if we call get resources, and do a call on get integer, and from here, from Android.resource.integer, we're given these animation times. So we're going to use one of the default animation times. I'm going to use the long animation time just so it's easy to see for the tutorial purposes. Okay, now I can actually create my method that's going to do the actual work of the animation. Let me just create that at the bottom. And I'm going to call it zoom image from thumb. And thumb stands for thumbnail. Okay, the first thing I want to do here is I want to check to see if there's an animation currently running. Our in current animator will hold a reference to the animation, and if there is one already running, I want to cancel it. If in current animator is not equal to null, in other words, there's already one running, let's cancel it. Okay, the next step here is to actually get our bitmap, full-size bitmap, into our image view, our full-size image view, and we'll use glide to do that again. Same call we've done but previous occasions. So load, and in this case it's going to be the image URI, and it's going to be into the pinch zoom image view. Okay, now we can actually start the beginning procedures of that animation. So what we're actually going to do here is work out our boundaries, our bounds, left, right, top, bottom of our thumbnail, and then scale that up to the full size image. So there's going to be a fair bit of math here, so bear with me and I'll try and get through this as fast as I can. Okay, so I need to create some recs to hold the bounds. So I'll call the first one start bounds, represents the thumbnail. And I'll do a final bounds that represents the full size image. Call that final bounds. Now I need to create a point here, and it's going to represent the global offset. So anything offset in the overall container. So I'll call this global. Okay, now I need to initialize the values for my bounds from the image views themselves. So I'll start with the thumbnail first of all, and we can get that from the image view. And by calling get global visible rec, that will give us the values to initialize our rect of what visibly is showing from our thumbnail. So we're passing start bounds here. And now we're going to do the same for the actual container itself, because that will hold the global offset as well as get the values for our final bounds. So to do that, we need to get the overall container. Remember when I set an ID for that? So first of all, to get that, I need to call find view by ID and call that container that we set up previously in the XML file. Now we can call get global rect and pass in the final bounds to get the values for those, and we can also initialize and get the values for our global offset. Okay, now we've got the global offset, we can pass in those values, those offset values, into our start and final bounds. So we'll do the start bounds first. I'm going to take off the global offset values in this case for X, and do the same for Y. And inside start bounds, we do need to call the method for the offset as such. So we've done that for start bounds, we need to do the same for final bounds, so I'll just paste that in there. Call it final bounds. That is now done. Okay, we've now set up our bounds to the values we require. Okay, the next step is to cater for different aspect ratios. If both aspect ratios are fine, it's going to be a nice seamless transition from the thumbnail into full size image. But if you've got different aspect ratios, you can get a strange effect when you're zooming up in the animation. So we're going to cater for that now. So we're going to check the aspect ratios first. So I need to cast it to a float because we're going to be calculating these values for a float. Okay, so I'll work out the aspect ratio for my final bounds and start bounds and work out which is different. So whether we have to cater for what's called a horizontal expansion or a vertical expansion. Call final bounds width, then we're going to divide that by final bounds height. And check if it's bigger than. Need to cast again. Now we'll check it against the aspect ratio of the thumbnail. So it'll be start bounds width. Such. And before I move any further, we need to set up our start scale value, which will be a float. So that's going to hold the actual scale size. So in here we can now set up our start scale. And we'll pass in the start bounds height against the final bounds height. And don't forget, let's go back in here, we need to put a cast in here as well to get the full values back for float. Okay, once we've got the start scale for this, we can now work out our starting width to get our seamless animation expansion. So I need to set up another member here called start width. To calculate that, we pass in our start scale and multiply it by the final bounds width. Okay, now we've got the start width, we can now work out our offset values to pass into our starting bounds. So I'll set up another member called delta width. And it's going to take the start width here, and then we're going to subtract it from our start bounds width. And we need to divide that by 2. It's going to be passed. We're going to set it to both left and right sides of our starting bounds. Okay, now we've got the delta width. Now we can use the delta width to readjust our start bounds left and right parameters. So let's call our starting bounds. We'll adjust the left first and take away the delta width. And we'll do similar for the right. In this case, we're going to add the delta width there. Swap those two around. Okay, so we've now adjusted for the starting widths for any aspect changes. So now we need to do the starting heights adjustment as well if the orientations are different. Okay, it's called start scale again. And again, we need to cast it to float. And it's called start bounds. In this case, we're going to call start bounds width and divide that by the final bounds width. Start scale. Okay, the next thing here, we want to work out a starting height. And again, it's going to be start scale. Times final bounds height as such. And it's a good idea to put a cast in here. I didn't do it above, I'll fix that now. So when I want to cast that, and we'll put it in the cast here as well. Okay, now let's work out our delta height. In this case, it's going to be starting height. Subtract that from the start bounds height. And again, we'll need to divide that by 2 because it's going to be passed to top and bottom in this case. Now we can readjust this top and bottom of our starting bounds. Do the top first. It's going to be subtracted from, we're going to subtract the delta height from that. And go and do the same for the bottom. Start bounds, bottom, and in this case, we're going to add the delta to that. Okay, so now we're factoring, we want nice, smooth, seamless expansion, animation expansions, and we've covered for the any orientation aspect sort of differences that may exist. Now the next step here is at this stage we want to remove our thumbnail. We can make that invisible, and we now want to set the visibility of our full size image view. We want to make that visible. Okay, so first of all we'll call it ImageView, and we can make it invisible by calling set alpha and passing in this value. Now if we go into the pinch zoom image view, we can change the set visibility to visible as such. Okay, now we want to sort of control the offsets. We want to have center offsets, so it expands from the inside out, not from top and bottom. And so I found out I need to set these values for adjusting the pivot. So I'll call mpinch image view. We can call set pivot X, and I'm just going to set that to 0. And I'm going to do the same for pivot Y. As such. Okay. I've now set everything up. Now I can actually start my animation calls, and I'm going to be doing 4 animation calls in parallel, so I'm going to use an animator set. Here it is here. I'm just going to call it set, and I'm going to create the object. Now we can actually just start calling our animations. First one we need to do is going to be play. And inside there I'm going to pass in an object animator with the value of off float. And inside there the first value you need to pass is going to be our full size image view. Now we're going to set the value of that image view to do the animation from, which is going to be the X position of that view. Now we set the starting destination is going to be starting bounds left, and destination is going to be the final bounds left. As such. Now I need to do, this is from left, now I need to do the same thing for top. And I can just call width in this case, we need to pass another object animator, call the off float. And pass in pinch zoom. I should have copied and pasted this. This is going to be view.y, and it will be start bounds.top and final bounds.top. And then we copy and paste. Now we need to do our scaling, pass in our scaling values. So the first thing I need to do is just go to view. And so this, I'm going to change the scale X in this case. And in the next parameter, we're going to pass in our start scale. And the last parameter, the final scale is always going to be a maximum value of 1. So I'm going to set that to 1. Because it's a float, we need to set that. Now we'll do the same for Y. Change that to Y. And complete that. Okay, so those are our animations set up now. Now the next step is we're going to set the duration for the animation. And it was long duration. Then we're going to set up what type of animation we want, which is going to be a deaccelerator. So that's we're going to call set interpolator, and we're going to pass a deaccelerator. And so in other words, acceleration is going to start off quickly and then deaccelerate. Now I need to add some listeners to my animators, because if there's a current animation in process, I need to cancel that and to go through with this one. So we need to call it a listener, add a listener. And this is going to be the animator listener adapter I'm going to call here. And there's going to be a couple of methods I'm going to override. The first one's going to be end. So down here I will set the current animator to null. Now I need to override another method. And this is going to be cancel. And I'll do the same thing again. Set the current animator to null. Okay, if we've finally made it this far without any red horizontal lines, we can actually start our animation by calling start. And down here we're going to set our current animator to the set as well. Okay, the final thing we need to do here is just to call the zoom image from thumb. Okay, and that's going to happen into the long click. So we can comment out this toast. And now call our zoom image from thumb method. Okay, there's a couple of bugs I want to fix and a final touching up just to get our thumbnail center, so I'll fix those first. Here's a bug I just spotted prior to running the application. It's called container. So let's go into our layout here, and it's container. I don't know what that means. Let's save that. Okay, the next thing here is I'm aligning my thumbnail here to the line parent stop, top and start. It's probably going to put it in the top left hand side. I want this thumbnail to be center, so I need to remove these two lines here. And if I change to space, and if I change the layout to center, layout, let's see what happens when so I'm going to call center in parent and set that to true. So intention here is to put the thumbnail in the center of my application. Okay, save that. Now let's go back to the code. Okay, the container's now been done. Now, another thing I do need to change from the previous tutorial was loading the full-size image. Now I need to go back and use the previous code for the thumbnail. So if I scroll back up here it is here. Now these 3 lines here are now done in the zoom animation, so I can delete those 3 lines. And we can uncomment this line of code here. And let's fix that so it loads our member image URL as such. Remember, I will put all this code does go into my website as well. There will be a link following on at a later stage from this tutorial. Okay, let's save that. Now let's try running this application and see what happens. Okay, I'm just going to record this so you can see what's happening. Okay, I've got some thumbnails of Japan in the middle of winter. Select one. Now we have the thumbnail all nicely centered in our application, so we need to hold and long click press. And hopefully you caught that. You sort of saw an animation slowly expanding. We caught deaccelerating into the full size image. Okay, so that completes this tutorial of adding animations from changing from a thumbnail to a full-size image. It really does add something to your applications. So what have we learnt? I've learnt that adding animations to a tutorial takes a really long time. But other than that, you've also learnt that for calculations of the starting and ending destinations with the times, it does take a certain amount of thought of what you're doing. You'll notice how we set up our start bounds, our final bounds, our global offsets. There is a bit of math involved in this as well, but it's well worth the effort just to step your applications up to the next level. Anyway, that concludes this tutorial. If you want to get notified of the later episodes to this tutorial series, as well as the other tutorials that I'm working on, click on that subscribe button down below. And also, if you want to keep up to date with the latest updates, news from mobile applications, you can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Google+, as well as Pinterest. And that's all for this one. Bye for now.